Hi, everyone. Today is the reading and writing workshop for the SAT that I am offering in partnership with the Safety Harbor and Seminole Public Libraries. We are going to be looking at the reading and writing and language section of the SAT today, which has been split into two modules by the College Board for the new updated digital SAT. To start off with today, as we're waiting for more people to join, I'm going to launch a poll just so that I can learn a little bit more about you guys that have joined today. So I'm going to launch this one. And let's see here. So give me 1 second, and I'm going to launch it. And you should see questions pop up on your screen that says anonymous. I won't be able to see who said what. Not that these questions are that intrusive anyways. They're just asking you if this will be the first time taking your SAT, taking the SAT, if you've ever taken the digital SAT, when you'll be taking it, if you've ever taken a workshop with me before, and then we're going to dive into the content. So for those of you just joining today, my name is Carla Berry, and I have been helping students prepare for the SAT and ACT and for college admissions with applications, the Common App, essays for well over a decade. We are nearing 2 decades here now soon, but we'll just say for well over a decade for now. And today I am offering this SAT writing and language workshop in partnership with both the Safety Harbor Public Library and the Seminole Public Library. So the entire workshop will be via Zoom. You can see me, I cannot see you. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. There's also an anonymous Q&A feature. So if you're slightly embarrassed about your question, you can always ask it anonymously. And you can also use the chat feature. Let me make sure that I have chat enabled because sometimes it is not enabled. And now it is enabled, so you will also be able to use the chat feature. So I can see most of you have answered this poll. For most of you, 75% of you said this will be the first time that you're taking the SAT. Only 4 of you have taken the digital SAT so far, and only 2 of you ever took the paper SAT. So for most of you, this is going to be a whole new SAT experience. You don't have anything to compare it to. What grade are you in? We have a couple of middle schoolers, which is great, and then 9th, 10th, and 11th graders, and even 12th graders. So that's awesome. When will you be taking the test? Over or almost half of you will be taking the SAT this spring or summer in 2024, and then a couple of you later in 2024. And I guess depending on your spring or summer SAT results, you may also be taking it again later this year. Have you ever taken a library workshop with me before? A couple of you have, most of you have not. So welcome to all of you, especially those of you returning for more workshops from me. Hopefully I did a great job in the past. And for those of you joining for the first time today. So I'm going to end this poll since everyone had a chance to answer it. And if you can, in the chat feature, if you feel comfortable sharing it with everyone, if you can put your goal score where you would like to be for the reading and writing and language section, that will help guide me today for what kind of questions to focus on. But most of all, I'm just opening up my iPad here, going to be focusing on questions that will give you the most points. So if you have had workshops with me in the past for either the SAT or the ACT, you will know that I have the core concepts for the SAT. For the new digital SAT, I am still updating the reading and writing and language core concepts. If you have that handout from past workshops that you may have taken with me, the math core concepts have stayed the exact same. So if you are taking, or it stayed the same at least so far. So if you're taking the math workshop with me next month, you'll see the math core concepts. And as soon as I finalize the reading and writing and language course concepts, I will share that with everyone too. But for now, I am still simmering on them and deciding what to put in there, since the reading and writing and language section has undergone significant changes for the new updated digital SAT. So for those of you who are in the workshop today, does anyone have questions about the format, how the SAT is structured now compared to how it was structured when it was a paper test? So for instance, when it was a paper test, there was the reading section with really long reading passages and then questions on those reading passages. And then the writing and language section, which had basically English grammar questions for the most part. And now those two sections have pretty much been combined into one section that has two different modules. So the new digital SAT is an adaptive test. And I'm actually going to share my iPad screen here so I can write on a board as I speak. So it's somebody asked what is the scoring, and it's still out of 1600. So the best score you can get for the verbal section would be 800, and the best score for the math section would also be 800. So the SAT is an adaptive test. And it is digital. So it's a digital adaptive test. And the verbal section has two modules. So there's the first module. And how you do on the first module that is going to basically impact whether you go to an easy or a hard second module. So I've heard that on TikTok and other social media apps, there are all kinds of rumors floating around about the SAT where people have said, oh, you should purposefully answer questions wrong in the first module so that you get an easier second module, which I would say is absolutely not true. That is not what you should do if you want to maximize your score, because then your score is going to be capped automatically. So if you miss a certain number of questions in the first module and then you go to the second easier module, it means you're triggering a second module that's easy and your score is going to be capped in, let's say, the mid 600s. You're not going to be able to get a 700 or higher if you go to the easier second module. If you go to the harder second module, you're going to get harder questions, and then you can score in a higher SAT range. I see there's a question here in the chat. I don't want to, how much time do you get on this section? So you get 64 minutes for this verbal section. And there's going to be 54 questions. And the 64 minutes is split into the two modules. So you're pretty much getting 1 minute and 11 seconds per question. And the two modules are equal length. And you get a 10-minute break between the reading and writing section and the math section. You get a break. But overall, the SAT is now a shorter test. It's only 2 hours and 15 minutes. For the entire test, which is not that bad at all. So if this is your first time taking the SAT and you have no comparison at all between the SAT and the ACT, I would recommend that you also take a practice ACT and see how you do on the ACT compared to the SAT, and then determine which test you're going to take based on that information. If you've already taken the PSAT in the past and you're already signed up for the SAT and you're planning on the SAT, then I would just proceed with the SAT. But let's say you're in middle school and you could take either test, I would definitely do some legwork in the beginning to decide which test is best for you. So this is the first year that we have the digital SAT exclusively. So it's no longer possible to go and take a paper SAT. So since it's The first year that it's exclusively digital, I would say it's a good idea to still look at the ACT, especially if you like taking tests on paper to see if you have a preference or if you perform higher on one test compared to the other test. But I don't want to spend too much time on comparing the tests. I do want to dive into the questions. So on the College Board's website, they do offer practice for students. And I personally like taking tests on paper. And when I am teaching students, I use the linear practice tests that are not digital for tutoring sessions, or later this year when I offer courses for the SAT, or if I offer workshops for the SAT, I would use the linear or paper tests that the College Board provides for practice. But after you have practiced for the SAT, so after you are done with the practice test, I would definitely go on the College Board's website and download the Blue Book app, the digital SAT practice in the Blue Book, and take the 4 practice tests that are digital. But before you take those 4 practice tests that are digital, I would definitely first practice on paper. Since this is a brand new test, we don't have as much resources available to us as we did for the paper SAT from last year and years prior. So the resources that the College Board provides are much more valuable to us, and there's not that many, so we don't want to waste it. You don't want to download that Blue Book app and start clicking through those questions and answering them when you haven't practiced at all yet for the SAT, just going in blind. We don't want to do that. So I'm going to open up a new practice test on my iPad here. Just give me 1 second, and we're going to start looking at questions in the first practice test. It might actually be faster for me to stop sharing my screen just for a second and open up that practice test. Let's go here. Practice test 1 is going to be the one we look at today. And I'm just going to open that up on my iPad. And if at any point you see me writing and you think that I'm thinking that I'm sharing my screen and I'm not, please tell me, because sometimes I do forget to share my screen if I'm toggling back and forth. Right now, as I'm opening this, I am not sharing my screen and I'm fully aware. But in a few minutes, if you see me writing and talking and I'm not sharing my screen, please do tell me. Okay, let me open this up. And if in the chat, you can also put which high school you go to and your grade, just so you guys can get to know each other too. So I see some of the answers here are a 1450 and a 1350 in the chat so far. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can also see the questions. So you can see here in the first module, there are 33 questions. In the second module, there would be another 33 questions, so that you have that 66 questions total. You're going to see a mix of questions in this section. So it's really important as you read a question to shift mentally, to not think, oh, this must be a reading comprehension question, when it's actually a grammar question. You really want to stay on your toes for this entire section. So here it starts out just with sentence completion. So one new thing on the digital SAT is that, here, I'm actually going to open this in a different app so I can write on it. So for the digital SAT, we have these sentence completions. And we didn't have that on the paper SAT last year and the years prior. I have been tutoring the SAT and teaching students how to take the SAT for long enough that I remember a few changes ago. So let's say 12, 14, 15 years ago, there were sentence completions on the SAT, I'm pretty sure. So they've actually brought something old back, which I really liked back in the day when they had the sentence completion. So this was a change that I really liked. So here we have sentence completions. You're going to see that in this section. You're also going to see reading questions. See here how it asks the main purpose of this little passage. So it's going to ask questions about reading comprehension. And then they're going to ask some questions about data tables, not that many, maybe one or two. I doubt more than that in a section. And then very last, you're also going to see standard English convention questions, so just grammar questions in this section. And I definitely opened up not the test that I wanted to open up. So give me 1 second here. I opened up my answer key, which I did share with all of you, but I wanted a blank test instead, not an answer key. So that was silly me. Let me open up a blank test here and look at these questions. And again, that Blue Book app that I showed you, you can download that now onto your computer and start practicing in it, but I would wait to download the Blue Book app until after you've taken the other practice tests and resources that they share with students. So one thing about preparing for the SAT, it's really important as much as possible to use actual SAT questions instead of questions from third parties. So as many questions that you can look at from the College Board or from Khan Academy would be ideal versus starting to buy question books from third parties. So let's dive on in and just start looking at some questions here and how to approach them. So the sentence completion questions overall, if you have a pretty decent vocabulary, are not going to be very challenging. They should be fairly easy. If you did not have great vocabulary education in your high school curriculum, you may want to start looking at some vocabulary workbooks or doing some vocabulary practice and apps on your phone or online. There are a lot of different vocabulary resources available out there. If you feel that you are lacking in vocabulary, please feel free to email me and I can direct you to some of those resources. But for most students, vocabulary questions aren't going to be too tough. And within the question itself, so within that paragraph here, we're going to be able to find the definition of whatever we are going to pick for the word. So since this is a standardized test, there has to be concrete evidence for whatever answer we pick. So my favorite section, I'd say overall, is the math section. I love the math section because you can feel 100% sure that you picked the right answer because you're calculating a number, right? It's really concrete. And the reading and writing and language section is not as concrete, but if you approach this section in a very logical, methodical way, you can get to the point where you're pretty much getting concrete answers and you can be confident that the answer that you pick is the right answer. So let's read this. I like first looking at this question stem part to see what am I trying to find? What am I looking for here? So which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? So that means I want to plug in a word. We do not want to look at the answer choices before we pick our own answer. So something that will go into the core concepts for the reading and writing section is using your own words to formulate an answer choice before before looking at their answers. It's infinitely easier to come up with an answer on your own and then use process of elimination to eliminate answers that don't match what you found or pick an answer that matches what you found versus trying to plug in the answer choices provided and seeing which one sounds best because they are going to provide you with answer choices that all sound great, or at least two of them are going to sound great when you plug them in. And if you're just going based on what sounds best and you're not looking for that concrete evidence, you're going to end up picking an answer that is not the credited response. So let's see here. Former astronaut Ellen Ochoa, I don't know how to say that, says that although we're always paying attention to those transitions. If you have taken past courses or workshops with me, you know that important information tends to follow after the word but or any word of contrast. So after we see although, however, but, despite those words of contrast, we really want to pay attention. Those are speed bumps that tells us to slow down and pay attention because important information is about to come. And that has been the case for over a decade. Even when the SAT makes some changes, this has remained constant. So former astronaut Ellen Ochoa says that although she doesn't have a definite idea of when it might happen, she blanks that humans will someday need to be able to live in other environments than those found on Earth. This conjecture, so she doesn't have a definite idea. So we need something that is uncertain. She's uncertain about it, or she guesses at something. And we want an answer choice that matches that. And further, they even say this conjecture. And if your vocabulary is advanced enough to know what the word conjecture means, and I'm going to give you the exact definition of that too right now, so that you can all expand your vocabularies if you don't know what it means. So conjecture is an opinion or conclusion formed on the basis of incomplete information. So we're going to say opinion based on incomplete info. So that's also uncertain, guessing. That's even further evidence for us. But we want an answer that's going to match. She's uncertain, guesses, doesn't have a definite idea of when it might happen. Demands does not have that uncertainty element. Establishes also does not. So we know it's not A or D. And using process of elimination, if I can speak today, is going to be infinitely easier than immediately trying to pick the right answer. So if I was just immediately trying to pick an answer that matches uncertain or guessing, I may accidentally pick the wrong answer first. So she doesn't have an indefinite idea of when it might happen. She blanks that humans will someday need to be able to live in other environments than those found on Earth. This conjecture informs our interest in future research missions to the moon. Who can tell me what the answer is? Is the answer B or C? Can you tell me in the chat? Does she speculate or doubt? Great. So she speculates, and everyone seems to understand that one. So that's great. So she speculates. She doesn't doubt. So speculate is the word that we're going to plug in there. And we're going to go with B. Let's look at number 2 here. So this is another sentence completion if we skim this part. Beginning in the 1950s, Navajo Nation legislator Annie Dodge Wanuka continuously worked to promote public health. So I love semicolons for sentence completions because generally when we have a semicolon, it indicates that the definition or a paraphrase of whatever word we are looking for was just provided or is about to be provided. In this case, we have continuously worked right here. So we know we want something that shows that continuous work in that blank. It's right there for us. So try this one on your own. Finish reading that and then look at those answer choices and see which one fits best with continuously worked. I see one answer already. Great. So C, persistent. So remember, even though we are in the reading and writing section, we can still find exact answers that provide clear, concrete evidence for what we are picking. Let's see. I don't want to do too many of these because I feel like they're pretty straightforward for the most part. If you see one on the page that, let's look at one more. I'm going to pick one right here. Let's do number 4. The parasitic daughter plant increases its reproductive success by flowering at the same time as the host plant it has latched onto. In 2020, Jianqing Wu and his colleagues determined that the tiny daughter achieves this blank with its host by absorbing. So this something, what does it achieve? It achieves something, its success, by flowering at the same time. Which answer there would fit with doing something at the same time? I see you all have that answer too. Great. You're a great group here today. You are definitely on your game, even though it's 4:30 on a Saturday or almost 4:30. Okay, let's have you do one on your own. We'll have you do number 6 on your own. And once you have the answer, just put it in the chat. So I'm going to have you do that on your own. And remember, look at that punctuation. I'll have you do 95% of it on your own. I'm just going to point out that there's that semicolon there, but the rest on your own. And once you have that answer, put it in the chat. I'm going to show you here too. We have seminal Muskogee director Sterling Harjo, a blank television's tendency to situate native characters in the distant past. This rejection, so something that means rejection. So we know it's not going to be proclaims or foretells. It's going to be one of the other answer choices, either A or D. Repudiates or recants. So there's something that happens in standardized testing that happens to everyone. And I want you all to be aware of this so you don't make this mistake. So whenever we are faced with an answer choice, especially if it's a vocab type question where we don't know the vocab, if we see an answer that is a word that we just don't know, some students will pick that word that they don't know at all, even if they see another word that they do know works, out of fear that the word that they don't know is better, even if they see a word that they know works. So let's say you know repudiates means refuse to accept. Let's say you know that. And you're like, that works. But I don't know what recants means. Uh-oh. So I'm going to pick recants because maybe recants is better than answer choice A, refuse to accept, even though refuse to accept basically means a rejection. So don't do that. If you see an answer choice that works, don't pick a word that you don't know out of fear that it's going to be better. Something else that sometimes happens, so the complete opposite would be, let's say you don't know what repudiates means, but you know that recant, and I'm going to give you the formal definition of recant here. It's to say that one no longer holds an opinion or belief, especially one considered heretical. That's a really long definition, so instead I'm going to give you some synonyms. Let's say change your mind. That's a lot easier. Or deny, or renounce. That would be better. Let's say you know that doesn't work. You know answer choice D's definition, you know it doesn't work, but then some students will pick D, even though they know it doesn't work because they don't want to pick a word that they don't know, so they won't pick A. I hope I'm not confusing all of you with this because it's kind of tricky to explain, but the gist of it is, if you see an answer that you do not know what that answer means, but you can confidently eliminate all the other answer choices, just go ahead and pick the answer that you don't know what it means. It's probably going to be the right one. Likewise, if you see an answer works, but there's another answer choice that you don't understand, just go with the one that you feel works. Don't pick the one that you don't understand out of fear that it's just a smarter answer choice, but you're not smart enough to understand it. I think that's an easier way to summarize that. Let's go on to a different question type in this section. So, main purpose questions. So the best strategy for main purpose questions or any of the reading comprehension questions is to formulate the answer again in your own words before you look at the answer choices. So for this question, you would read that whole paragraph, decide what they're trying to do, and then look at the answer choices. So here we have, in 2007, computer scientist Louis von Ahn was working on converting printed books into a digital format. He found that some words were distorted enough that digital scanners couldn't recognize them, but most humans could easily read them. Based on that finding, von Ahn invented a simple security test to keep automated bots out of websites. The first version of the reCAPTCHA test asked users to type one known word and one of many words, and one of the many word scanners couldn't recognize. Correct answers proved the users were human and added data to the book digitizing project. So what is the main purpose here in your own words? Let's think about that. So this is overall about that reCAPTCHA test. So we definitely want to include reCAPTCHA in our answer. It's not just how digital scanners work, because what about reCAPTCHA? To call attention to von Ahn's book digitizing project, it's more than that, because remember there was that security test element. So it can't be C. So it has to be A or D here to discuss von Ahn's invention of reCAPTCHA or to indicate how popular reCAPTCHA is. Well, it never mentions how popular it is. So it has, oops, I crossed out the right answer there. Has to be A. And if you answer questions in this way, it really simplifies it. By a raise of hands, does this feel pretty easy today? I want to see if I can see your hands here. See, 1 hand, 2 hands, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Okay, more than half of you. So that's great. More of half of you are finding it relatively easy and straightforward. And even if you didn't raise your hand and it doesn't feel that easy, you're still a little intimidated by it, that's okay too. The more you look at these questions and the more you practice them, the easier it becomes and the less intimidating it becomes. I have been helping students prepare for both the SAT and the ACT, the PSAT, the PACT, AP exams, all kinds of tests for long enough and such a wide variety of students that I can confidently say when you put in the effort and you practice and practice and practice, you can get there. Even if at first it feels really overwhelming and really intimidating. So I really want to encourage all of you to put in the effort and to practice for this test, I saw on the College Board's website today, I thought it was kind of comical. They said that I think 2 weeks before, I'm going to make up some numbers, so don't quote me on this directly, but they said something along the lines of 2 weeks before you take the SAT, download the Blue Book app, take a practice test, and then a week before, I think, take another practice test, and then go take the SAT. So you're only preparing for the SAT with 2 practice tests and 2 weeks before you take the SAT, and you really need more time than that. And you really need to look at more questions than that if you want to improve your score. If you just want to score where you would score without any practice, 100% take their advice. But if you want to increase your score, you are definitely going to want to practice more than that. Okay, let's look at question number 8. And it asks, which choice best describes the function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole? So the following text is from Edith Wharton's 1905 novel, The House of Mirth. Lily Bart and a companion are walking through a park. Lily had no real intimacy with nature, but she had a passion for the appropriate and could be keenly sensitive to a scene which was the fitting background of her own sensations. The landscape outspread below her seemed an enlargement of her present mood, and she found something of herself in its calmness, its breadth, its long free reaches. On the nearer slopes, the sugar maples wavered like pyres of light. Lower down was a massing of gray orchards, and here and there the lingering green of an oak grove. Okay. She had a passion and could be keenly sensitive to a scene, which was the fitting background of her own sensations, and then it describes how the landscape outspread below her seemed an enlargement of her present mood. So I would say this is an example of what it says previously. It's providing how, and remember that but is a speed bump, that important information is about to follow. So it is not establishing that a character is experiencing an internal conflict. It's not going to be B. It makes an assertion that the next sentence then expands on. Well, it doesn't expand on it. It gives an example of it. So it's not going to be C. And then versus A or D. A, it creates a detailed image of the physical setting of the scene. Sure, it does. But how does it work in this passage as a whole? Hey, you're all onto it, which is great. No, it does not. It's D. It illustrates an idea that is introduced in the previous sentence. It's giving us that example. Great job with that one. Okay, let's see on the next page. There's another function and purpose question. Ooh, let's see this one. Number 10, the following text is adapted from Edith Nesbit's 1906 novel, The Railway Children, and they ask, according to the text, what is true about mother? So again, we are going to try to formulate an answer in our own words before looking at the answer choices. Mother did not spend all her time in paying dull visits to dull ladies and sitting dully at home waiting for dull ladies to pay visits to her. She was almost always there. So we don't care about what she didn't do. We care about what she did, right? What is true about her? So she was almost always there, ready to play with the children and read to them and help them do their home lessons. Besides this, she used to write stories for them while they were at school and read them aloud after tea. And she always made up funny pieces of poetry for their birthdays and for other great occasions. So she plays with them, reads to them, helps them, writes stories and poetry for them. So this should make it really easy for us to eliminate some answer choices. She does not wish that more ladies would visit her. That's the opposite. opposite answer choices are really tempting and incorrect. They're tempting because they have words in the sentence or in the answer choice that are directly in the passage. So that's appealing to us because they're familiar, but they're opposite because it's the direct opposite of what's actually stated using those words. So it's not A. Birthdays are her favorite special occasion. Maybe that's true, but it's not stated in the passage. So B is out. She creates stories and poems for her children. Yes, she does. Reading to her children is her favorite activity. That could also be true, but we don't know that. It says according to the text. So it has to be C. If it asked us to infer, make an inference, or for us to speculate, then maybe it could be D. And they wouldn't give us answer choice C as an option if that was the case. But they said according to the text. So we have to use the text to come up with an answer there. Let's see which other ones to look at here. And if you would all see a question and you want us to look at it together today, please feel free to ask me to go over a specific question. If you're glancing through the test and you see a question and you think, oh my goodness, I would not know what to do with that one, by all means, please ask me. Let's look at number 13 here, because I feel that longer questions with long answer choices tend to be intimidating to students. But if you know what to focus on for those questions, they don't have to be that intimidating. So it says, which finding, if true, would most directly support the student's claim? So if true, would most directly support. So we need to figure out what is the student's claim. We can figure out what the claim is, it's going to be relatively easy to figure out what supports that claim. Born in 1891 to a Quechua-speaking family in the Andes Mountains of Peru, Martin Chamby is today considered to be one of the most renowned figures of Latin American photography. In a paper for an art history class, a student claims, yay, it's about to give us the claim. We need to pay attention. That Chamby's photographs, so I'm actually going to erase my underlining up there to make it clearer for you all. Photographs have considerable ethnographic value in his work. Chamby was able to capture diverse elements of Peruvian society, representing his subjects with both dignity and authenticity. So we want something that's going to show that his photographs have considerable ethnographic value and or are diverse. So let's see here. Answer choice A, Chamby took many commissioned portraits of wealthy Peruvians, but he also produced hundreds of images carefully documenting the people, sites, and customs of indigenous communities of the Andes. So that would be of ethnographic value, and it's also diverse. So that works. But we can't simply stop when we find an answer choice that works, because we have to pick the best answer. And remember, we are focusing on using process of elimination. So even if you come across an answer choice where you're like, this has to be it, you still need to make sure that it's not the other ones. I know it's tedious and tiring, but we have to do it because we don't want to just give away any points. So answer choice B, Chamby's photographs demonstrate a high level of technical skill as seen. Oh, he doesn't say anything about technical skill here. It's about that ethnographic value and it being diverse, so B is out. During his lifetime, Chamby was known and celebrated both within and outside his native Peru, and his work was published in places like Argentina, Spain, and Mexico. No, we want something that circles back to being diverse. D, some of the people and places Chamby photographed had long been popular subjects for Peruvian photographers. Can't be D, so it has to be A. And we can confidently pick A. And you'll notice the trend here when we're using process of elimination and we are evaluating every single answer choice next to whichever answer we formulated in our own words, we can be really comfortable, we can be really confident that the answer that we're picking is the right answer. Let's look at this table question. And remember that you can bounce back and forth within each section. So if you come across a question that is really intimidating, skip it and come back to it. Do not get stuck on a question. Remember that you get the same point for an easy question as you do for a hard question. So we are collecting points here. We are trying to get as many points as we can. We are really, that's our goal. Let's see here. Which data choice most effectively, or which choice most effectively uses data from the table to complete the example? So we're going to have to read here. Some researchers studying Indigenous actors and filmmakers in the United States have turned their attention to the early days of cinema, particularly the 1910s and 1920s, when people like James Young Deere, Dark Cloud, Edwin Carraway, and Lillian St. Cyr, known professionally as Red Wing, were involved in one way or another with numerous films. In fact, so many films and associated records for this era have been lost that counts of those four figures' output should be taken as bare minimums rather than totals. It's entirely possible, for example, so these are bare minimums. Using that information, I want you to evaluate each answer choice, and you can put it in the chat box once you've answered it. Great, I already see the correct answer there in the chat box because you are zooming in on the far more. Lillian St. Cyr acted in far more than 66 films, and Edwin Carraway directed more than, because those are bare minimums. So the answer has to be C. Let's see there. Great. Let's go on to, I want to get to some grammar questions too. And I'm going to have to go grab a tissue because I have terrible allergies. So what we're going to do is have you complete 19, 20, and 21 while I go grab a tissue. And I'm going to be right back, and then we're going to answer those with rapid speed. Okay, once I see your answers pop in for 19, 20, and 21, we'll start looking at them. But I'm just going to give you, I'd say, 2 minutes to answer those three. Let's go ahead and take a look at these questions. So one thing I want you to know about the standard English conventions that you're tested on for the SAT is that I send all of you a grammar handout. And let me pull up a copy of the grammar handout. I accessed it fairly recently because you have way too much stuff going on here. But this grammar handout is my go-to resource for both the SAT and the ACT for standard English convention questions. So those are questions that are basically testing you on grammar. Definitely study this handout. It's only 14 pages long. It gives you the rule and then what to do and what not to do for each rule. And if it's in this handout, it's going to be on the SAT. So definitely spend a lot of time with that. The great thing about grammar questions for the SAT is that I find they're probably the easiest questions to master to improve your score. So this is the place where you really want to focus a lot of studying effort on to master it and not miss any grammar questions or as few as possible. So I'll go ahead and give you the answers for 19, 20, and 21, and then let's look quickly how to answer them so that we can look at more questions. So 19, the answer is A. 20, it's also A. And then 21, it is C. So here I'm going to read this. Public awareness campaigns about the need to reduce single-use plastics can be successful, says researcher. When these campaigns give consumers a choice, for example, Japan achieved a 40% reduction in plastic bag use after cashiers were instructed to ask customers whether, who wants a bag? Customers, right? Ask customers whether they wanted a bag. It's plural, so it cannot be one, you, or it. It has to be answer choice A. Let's look at 20. Which choice, again, is adhering to standard English conventions? In ancient Greece, an Epicurean was a follower of Epicurus, a philosopher whose beliefs revolved around the pursuit of pleasure. Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the soul, positing that all life's virtues derive from this absence. Now, here's the problem. If I put a semicolon or a period there, and I just have positing that all life's virtues derive from this absence, who is positing? I'm missing my subject. So that makes it a fragment. I can't have those. And a colon can sometimes equal a semicolon and can sometimes equal a period if what comes after the colon, so sentence 2 explains sentence 1. So if I have two complete sentences, I could technically put a colon between them if the second sentence explains the first sentence. In this case, though, what comes after that colon would be a fragment, so I'm not going to do that. So here, we just have a phrase, so we just want that comma. Pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the soul. And then close the quotes with that comma, positing that all life's virtues derived from this absence. Let's look at number 21. British scientists James Watson and Francis Crick won the Nobel Prize in part for their 1953 paper announcing the double helix structure of DNA, but it is misleading to say that Watson and Crick discovered the double helix. Whose findings were based? Watson and Crick, so it has to be plural. So it's not it, and it's their findings. We want that possessive pronoun there. Remember, answer choice A there is they are. It's not a possessive pronoun like answer choice C. Let's look at question 26. I'm going to give you just a minute to attempt 26, and then we're going to look at it together. because this is a really common question type on the SAT. So here we have landing on one of the good spaces blanks a player to skip ahead and arrive closer to the end goal. So on one of the good spaces is a prepositional phrase. Prepositional phrases do not impact subject-verb agreement, so we can pretty much ignore that when deciding what our subject is. So it's landing that does something, and landing is singular, so it cannot be are allowing, have allowed, or the allow. It has to be a singular verb, so it has to be answer choice A. Great job with that one. Let's have you all try number 28. I'm going to give you a minute for that one, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Okay, let's see here. In 1453, English King Henry VI became unfit to rule after falling gravely ill. As a result, Parliament appointed Richard III, Duke of York, who had a strong claim to the English throne, to rule as Lord Protector. Upon recovering 2 years later, blank forcing an angered Richard. What do we need to put in there? A person. A person forcing an angered Richard from the royal court. So we need a person right after this comma. So not the reign, not Henry's reign, and not it. So it has to be answer choice A. And just so you know, with SAT language questions that deal with standard English conventions, we really, I'm going to use a red pen here to drive this home. We really don't like the word it if we can avoid it. So we don't like it. We don't like was. We don't like the word being. We also generally don't like long answer choices. So if we can avoid those, if you're ever in doubt, definitely avoid those. I am going to share a program evaluation form with you. This is completely anonymous, and it helps me plan future workshops and also learn what you gained from the workshop today. I just put the website in the chat box here, www.carlaberry.com/evaluation. So you can click that link, and I'll also show you how to get there on my website. And if you can take a minute to complete that while I open it up to questions. So if you have any questions, please put that in the chat box right now too. If you don't have any questions, just go ahead and complete this program evaluation. So you just go to carlaberry.com and then go to more, and program evaluation will pull this up. I'm in the process right now, planning workshops for the summer in partnership with the Safety Harbor Public Library and the Seminole Public Library. I haven't even mentioned it to them yet, but I am considering making 1 or 2 of those workshops in person. If that is something that appeals to you, having an in-person workshop, please put that in this little box here. Do you have any requests for future SAT, ACT, or college application programs? If you have a desire for in-person workshops. If it's doesn't matter to you if they're in person or not, you can put that there too. If you prefer virtual workshops or you have no preference for in-person versus virtual. I've been exclusively virtual since 2020. So before 2020, back in 2019 and earlier, all my workshops used to be in person. And those were fun too. But then with COVID, I went online and I've been online since, and I actually quite enjoy being online. All of my courses are also online via Zoom. All my one-on-one tutoring is also via Zoom. That's all via Zoom. I love Zoom because I can record my one-on-one sessions and I can record my courses, which enables students to later access those recordings if they want to review anything. And I like the online platform and interface, but you can put that in there if you have any requests for specific SAT workshops or ACT workshops. If you have a question, I'm going to lower all your hands. Just put it in the chat box if you could do that for me, or in the Q&A box. And then if you can also just focus your efforts on completing that form, that would be great. And if you have any other questions, please put it in the chat box. So if there's a question I didn't get to today in this section that you would have wanted me to look at, please put that in there. Or anything else you may have a question about related to the SAT. And I'm going to stop my share there. And I'm going to just check on this here. And I'm just going to give you a minute to submit that form. And if you have any questions too, be sure to put it in the chat box. Okay, don't see any. Oh, maybe there is a question. I just hear thank you. You're welcome. I hope that you all have a great weekend. Thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with me. I hope to see all of you back here next month for the math workshop. And please go ahead and submit those evaluation forms so that I can use your feedback to plan future workshops with the libraries. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.